restricted, which means many of you couldn't watch it.
What up, guys? Today, hold on. Today we are, oh my word, that's 2 hours long. We are not watching that. Hold on, guys. Hold on. Yeah. I can watch this. Hey, I like history. There's ads. There's. Hold on. It's all possible if we're all willing to fight together as a team. Look at this ad, bro. All right, let's get started.
When Egypt's old kingdom collapsed, it felt like the end of the world. But it didn't fade slowly, it snapped apart. Rome took centuries to develop.
What'd they say? Rome didn't fall in a day. Wait, no. Rome didn't burn in a day. Collapse? Same thing. Yeah, we're watching how ancient Egypt collapsed. Guys, that's what we're watching. I can't highlight this because I'm watching on the Xbox. Because this is what I have in my room and it's just a lot easier. Let's get started. Yeah, I love history, guys. What? Oh, this is my other account. Subscribe to this channel, bro. I'm all about that history stuff. Trust.
Maya vanished over generations, but Egypt's first empire shattered in just 20 years, as 18 rulers tore through the throne. For 500 years before that, Egypt had almost been untouchable. The Nile fed the people, the elites drowned in wealth. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler, he was a living god. Until the Nile failed, and the people who once worshipped their rulers started to turn on them instead. Because the fastest way to destroy a god is to let people watch him fail. Chapter 1. The Arrogance of the Machine. In the ancient world, the fatal flaw of every power was hubris. When times were good in Egypt's old kingdom, confidence flowed like the plentiful beer that the laborers drank when building the pyramids. But with confidence often came an arrogance and vanity that said we and we alone are God's chosen people. That said, the good times will never end. Through ingenuity and...
Little fun fact, majority of the people that built the pyramids were not slaves. Majority of the slaves were in the households of the, you know what I'm saying, of like other rich people. Because the reasons they built the pyramids because, what's it called? The reasons they would, the people that would build the pyramids are the ones that couldn't pay their taxes. The rich people would pay their taxes, right? So then they wouldn't have to go build the pyramids. Go bar for me real quick.
Industry.
I know you can't. I'm like that. You know nothing about your history.
Nature bent to Egyptian will. At the very center of all this hubris were the kings, pharaohs who told their people that they weren't just representatives of gods, they were living gods, the rulers of the universe. They had created one of the greatest civilizations in history. They built towering pyramids, incredible works of engineering that were testament to their brilliance. The Old Kingdom, from 2700 BC to 2200 BC, was evidence in itself that God could take human form. For many of those years, it was a time of peace and prosperity, when even the poor had food on their tables. But in their arrogance, the Egyptian royals overlooked the sheer unpredictability of the environment they thought they controlled. This was a kingdom built around a single point of failure. Every year, the great River Nile flooded the plains. The fertile soil created an abundance of crops, a food supply that year after year was enough to feed the populace. It was a perfect system. For the masses, the kings delivered on their promise to provide for all. But when things started to go wrong, when recorded flood levels became lower year after year, the kings had no answers. Without solutions, their power began to fade. The people lost faith in the system that they'd spent all their lives toiling for. And this system already was rigged against the common man. All wealth flowed upward and stopped at the pharaohs. Governing from Memphis, the capital on the banks of the Nile, their power was absolute. When the pharaoh walked outside of his palace, officials would throw themselves at his feet. He was treated like a deity on the earth. Below the mighty royals sat the bureaucracy.
W. Glaze? Could never be me, though. I only kneel to one man. That's my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Small elite of literate officials who managed the kingdom. Some were great scribes who used hieroglyphics to write administrative records and stories of suffering and heroism. High officials lived on estates granted by the king, but in theory he owned everything. Every village and town scattered across the 42 provinces, or nomes, where the populace farmed the land. When the officials died, their estates reverted back to the crown. The Old Kingdom did not run on a true monetary system. Farmers paid estate owners in crops and labor. The system was rigged. All wealth, food, and labor.
I know I keep pausing the video and all that, guys. I'm sorry, but and also another thing, purple was a sign of royalty back then too, and that's why you'll see me wear a lot of purple. It looks good on my skin. It looks great on my skin. Don't forget, it looks great on my skin, and it looks great on my skin. And the most important of all, it was used for royalty back in the day. Obviously, what do you think I was gonna say? Oh yeah, don't forget, it looks great. It looks great on my skin. So yeah.
Labor flowed uphill to a single man in
3
Memphis,
minutes. I paused it so many
everyone else
times.
survived on what trickled down. The rich displayed their status through imported luxuries in what for a long time seemed like an unbreakable hierarchical system. At the bottom were the masses, the ordinary laborers, illiterate, and all at the mercy of the crown. These people made up perhaps 98% of the populace. They spent their lives sacrificing their labor for the great kingdom, and they were paid in food and shelter and goods. They had built the pyramids, the palaces, the temples, the roadworks and dams. They fought in military campaigns in Nubia or in North Africa, and they did it because they knew they stood at the center of something immense. Their kingdom was home to the most advanced people on Earth, a civilization that for centuries was too powerful for any foreign invader to conquer. As long as the floods came, the land stayed green, the monuments rose, and the divine order endured. In effect, this was an entire economy that relied on the weather. All that wealth was highly concentrated into a single ruling family that couldn't afford a change in the climate. Kings who, instead of building larger state granaries for times of famine, built colossal monuments to their own egos. Men buried with riches for the afterlife, some even entombed alongside sacrificial officials and servants. But for as long as the royals delivered on their promises, the wheel...
So like imagine this. Imagine with me. You live in a great life. Not really a great life. You're probably a servant to the pharaoh, some crap. Brother dies. Bro dies. Think about it, you have to do this. You have to die. His wife has to die. Because you got to go with him because they believe that you go into the afterlife with that. That's why they also buried them with a bunch of gold and all that. Made no sense, bro. They worshipped everything but God.
Turning. The kingdom had been so perfectly engineered for success that its rulers had almost no contingency plans. Any serious deviation from the norm was a death sentence waiting to happen. Those pharaohs weren't supreme beings, they were mere mortals, and they'd soon discover to their abject horror that men cannot control nature. Chapter 2: The Geographic Cage. The world's climate changes. We understand that today, but during the Old Kingdom, neither king or governor nor wise scribe understood the perilous nature of regional climate shifts or their effect on the Nile's flooding cycles. Within their bottomless arrogance, the kings believed that when they died, they journeyed across the heavens with the creator of all life, the sun god Ra. By extension, Egyptian royalty was seen as being bound to the natural order. But in reality, the kings had no control over the sky or the river. For centuries, it was a near-perfect relationship between man and nature, but then the river simply stopped rising. The god king had no answers. At first, the change was subtle. The floodwaters gradually began to fall, measured by officials in Nilometers. Around 3000 BC, officials under King Narmer sent a warning. Something is wrong, the flood levels have lowered. Then came the long drought. The decline had begun. A dark age was upon the people of Egypt. Great pyramids were no longer raised. Vast temple projects slowed or stopped entirely. As the climate became more arid, vegetation retreated. Some plant life disappeared as sand dunes crept closer to human settlements. The governors of the 42 provinces, the nomarchs, grew in power as people lost faith in the centralized state. Regional magistrates and judges imposed their own authority. Wealthy priests started to give their support to local rulers, not the pharaoh and his government in Memphis. In what became a violent struggle for survival, ordinary people no longer turned to their divine king for salvation. They turned to whoever had the food. They called upon the governors, not their almighty king, to get them out of what had become a life or death crisis. As the people saw it, famine was a direct result of divine anger. If the kings were in touch with the divine, then the land becoming infertile had to be the king's fault. But he had no answers to the horror that had beset his people. Records show there were relief measures to distribute grain in times of crisis, but the king made appeals to the gods for help. And when it didn't come, he had...
Exactly, bro. Only one God. Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior.
Failed in the eyes of his people. There were many kings during the 500 years of the Old Kingdom, perhaps 25 to 30 in total, but it was the rulers of the 4th dynasty who became the ultimate symbol of Egyptian power, raising the greatest pyramids ever built. But by the 6th dynasty, 2345 BC to 2181 BC, these monuments of human ingenuity were reminders of greatness that had long passed. The crisis of the Old Kingdom peaked through a period of violent political upheaval. Pepi II, the final major king of the 6th dynasty, ruled Egypt for 90 years. By the time he died at 94, a bloody catastrophe was already unfolding. The illusion of his divinity was entirely gone. His sons and daughters had grown old waiting for the throne, and the second he died, the starving masses ripped his tomb apart and took everything, even his mummy. The temple of his father, Pepi I, was burned to the ground.
Even his
entire
mummy.
family was hated. In the vacuum of his death, the kingdom fractured. Within the next 20 years, 18 different rulers tore through the throne in rapid succession. But by then, the centralized power of the pharaoh in Memphis was already a ghost. Real authority now belonged to local nomarchs, making their own rules. These governors became hereditary, creating powerful dynasties that claimed to be great chieftains. They were leaders who fought against other provinces, beckoning a state of almost constant civil wars. Evidence of such mass bloodshed exists in a tomb archaeologists later unearthed. Egyptians were usually buried alone or with close family, but this mass grave of late Old Kingdom mummies contained 60 bodies, all male, and all had died violently. They were smashed in the head by rocks, felled by a mace, and had wounds that showed arrows had once pierced their bodies. These men died in battle. It's hard to say exactly how this crisis unfolded or which region suffered the most from drought and famine. Like most of ancient Egyptian history, we have very little evidence in which to paint a totally accurate picture. But it is certain that for countless people across the kingdom, disaster arrived with a...
Bro, I'm telling you, man, I don't only want to die in war, okay? But hear me out. Back in the day, it must have felt something different. It could never compare to now, where people can snipe you from 17,000 houses away, right? But here, back in the day, they run it now. For Sparta! Yeah! And then they charge into battle. Like, imagine all your boys, right? Think with me, right? Imagine all your boys, or if girls are watching this too. Imagine, no, it couldn't be the same with girls, Brian. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm sorry. But it's just mainly the boys, right? Imagine you have all your boys. One cause. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so like imagine, I know I keep saying imagine. Dodgeball like in high school and middle school. And y'all were like, you and your boys together. Just felt unstoppable. Ah! That's what it would feel like, bro. The testosterone, right? If I saw an army like that now, even though we have all these pew-pews, bro, I would get a little bit scared because they just look like they have the testosterone. All right, let's get this video. Keep going, my bad.
Vengeance. Many were effectively trapped inside of a narrow ribbon of civilization surrounded by expanding desert. To the west lay the Sahara, to the east harsh deserts and mountains, to the south difficult cataracts and rival territories, and to the north marshlands and the Mediterranean. For the common man, already weakened by hunger, there were no supplies for a long hazardous journey through foreign lands where bandits lay in wait. There were no real maps for navigation, no transport they could afford. So the commoner was tied to the state, a civilization built around a narrow oasis, surrounded by terrain that was almost impossible to cross without stores of food, water, and weapons. Just one man getting himself out was nigh on impossible, never mind his family. Egypt wasn't Rome. During the collapse of the Roman Empire, the most desperate people could migrate into neighboring provinces. They could move through forests, travel rivers, and settle almost wherever they wanted. Nor was Egypt like the Mediterranean world during the Bronze Age collapse in the 12th and 13th centuries BC. Entire groups were able to escape by sea and migrated across coastlines and islands. The people of Egypt had no such escape route. They were trapped under a blistering sun, waiting to die or go down fighting. This was a psychological crisis, not just a physical one. Chapter 3. When the gods failed. The people had lost faith. They became cynical and angry. They looked upon those towering pyramids and gilded graves as testaments to greed and excess. Lies, a spell that had been cast that was now shattered into 1,000 pieces. The tombs said it all, the inscriptions of the nomarchs who claimed that they saved their people from the worst of the devastation. I gave bread to the hungry and clothing to the naked. All of Upper Egypt was dying of hunger. The most terrifying part of this message? People were eating their children. Memphis still had.
Since Trump and Republicans like Bill Hines.
Let's stop right there. What? They were eating their children? That's a little weird. You know, something's off. Okay, and also, why did you live in the desert? Anybody else wondering that? I would have just never lived in the desert, first of all. I know what it's like. Oh my goodness. Boys, ladies and gentlemen, I have not slept today. At all. Let's get this video, just keep going. Bro.
Had the king, but his rulership likely barely extended as far as the city borders. The rest of the country was now ruled by these provincial administrators. Two inscriptions would proclaim them as overseer of Upper Egypt in the Middle Nomes, or even God's seal bearer. They didn't care about the pharaoh or the people, they cared.
Dude, I'm cold. I'm freezing to death right now. Oh no, this chick has my hoodie, bro. Oh, this chick has my hoodie, bro. Oh no. This chick has my hoodie. No. No.
About riches and influence that they'd have in the
Why?
When the floods failed, some
might we all gotta take our losses, right?
As the king to correct the course of devastation. Their grain stores likely emptied. Farmers would have desperately tried to grow their crops on sandbanks to no avail. Their leaders had proved themselves just as incompetent as the central government. Yet in all that tumult, some governors now proclaimed to their people that God had not forsaken them. One of them was Ankh-Tifi, a high official who it seems thought of himself as a pharaoh, or in his own words, a great chieftain. When much of Egypt starved, he claimed that he fed the desperate. He gave wives to men who had none. He gave shoes to those who walked on the hot land in bare feet. As men and women outside.
No one can enter heaven except through Jesus Christ. You want to get to the Father? You have to go through Jesus.
His prophets searched for food or plundered temples.
You can't get to heaven just by doing good deeds.
Brilliance lay in building dams and rationing food supplies. The inscriptions on his grave make him sound invincible. I am a man without equal. I am the front of people and the back of people. And then came the nomarch Kati II of Asyut, a man fiercely loyal to his king. But like other nomarchs, he too faced crop failures when the floods no longer arrived with enough force to make the soil fertile. Confronted with famine and the slow starvation of the people who looked to him for guidance, he later claimed he had spared his province the horrors suffered by most. I nourish my town. I acted as my own accountant in regard to food and as giver of water in the middle of the day. He dug a canal 10 cubits wide to divert water into the farmland. Like Ankh-Tifi, he was wise enough to construct dams. He rationed grain and stationed guards at the granaries to protect what little food remained from thieves. But these men might have been the outliers. Like the priest Hekanakht, who wrote, "Look, the whole land is dead, and you have not hungered." He too witnessed the specter of cannibalism. Look, they've started to eat people here. In a world where people resorted to the most extreme of human taboos,
people are
violence
disgusting.
erupted. The poor had no choice. They ate the donkeys and finally the children. Eventually, they fought back. They made up the overwhelming majority of the population, no matter how many guards stood watch over the estates of the rich or how many weapons lined their walls. The elites could not hold back the masses forever. The most disturbing accounts of this terrible chaos came from the writings attributed to a sage named Ipuwer. Historians still debate how accurate his words were. Some Egyptologists believed his descriptions were grounded in real events, but others argue they were political propaganda.
Also, like, how do you learn to read languages, you know? How would you read Egypt? Okay. Bird, crow, X, W, O. Oh, this guy just, it says, beware of curse. Okay, nice, nice. Is that how, like, it works? Because, like, I've seen some of these Egyptian thingies. They don't look like they even make sense.
From a later
It's not
age,
even English,
a
literally.
warning of what
Yeah.
happens when monarchy and divine order break down. Whatever the case, the famine and starvation were no doubt real. The hellish descriptions written by Ipuwer's hand might have some bearing in reality. Lo, the desert claims the land towns are ravaged. Upper Egypt became a wasteland. He wrote that the starving masses took the law into their own hands as they scavenged and fought for food. In their rage, they dashed noble infants' heads against walls. Some parents abandoned their own children. Envy and bitterness spread everywhere. Men dressed in fine clothes were beaten in the streets. Even wealthy women were no longer safe. Some were dragged away and sealed inside prisons to starve. Men stir up strife unopposed.
No, bro, that sounds like what's going on right now in New York, bro. That's literally what it sounds like right now because of freaking basketball. Something about the Chiefs or something. I don't know. I don't watch basketball. I don't really care. Nah, just the riots. Oh no! I knew this was gonna happen. No, please don't hit me with that ad. Ah!
He's trying to jack up rates.
Oh wait, Mike Cox.
And now I'm running for governor to win again by eliminating the income tax and getting prices down.
This chick has my hoodie, bro.
Olay Regenerist. Firmer, lifted, radiant skin. Without drastic measures.
Please, I gotta call her back. Yo, give me back my hoodie, bro, please.
Did you know 60% of dogs are overweight? That's why 100% of our food is personalized to your dog's needs.
Oh, I just want my hoodie back.
And live longer.
That's so
Farmer's
depressing.
Dog, for the love of dog.
Where is he?
Gordon Ramsay!
Whistle, and you think this is a good time to fill it at sea bass?
Yes? No.
Who could cook at a time like this? With hundreds of deals on Uber Eats.
I love Gordon Ramsay videos, bro. I love Gordon Ramsay. He's awesome.
In their rage, they dashed noble infants' heads against walls. Some parents abandoned their own children. Envy and bitterness spread everywhere. Men
Sounds like America to
were
me.
beaten in the streets. Even wealthy women were no longer safe. Some were dragged away and sealed inside prisons to starve. Men stir up strife unopposed. Groaning is throughout the land, mingled with laments. See now the land deprived of kingship. Pestilence swept across the provinces. Bodies floated through the rivers and canals. Waterways stained red with blood and disease. The poor looted the rich and cried out, "Let us suppress the powerful among us." Families turned on each other. A man regards his son as his enemy. He who puts his brother in the ground is everywhere. In a world like this, where greed and cynicism drove men to their worst impulses, the wise scribe no longer had influence. His words were ignored by a desperate populace trying to get what they could. Whole towns were laid to waste. The country turned to desert, and in the heat of such weakness, Asiatic barbarians arrived to finish off a people who were too divided to mount a defense. Creating a central authority to fight back was impossible. Tax records and government documents needed to run a country had already been destroyed. Poor men, ordinary men, trampled all over ancient customs when they went where they before had been barred. Lo, the great council chamber is invaded. Beggars come and go in the great mansions.
That's
the secrets
crazy.
of Egypt's kings are bared.
That's crazy, bruh. They really, it's crazy. Look at our society today, bruh. Same thing's almost happening right now. It's crazy.
These men stole the records and murdered the scribes. They destroyed books, the agricultural knowledge that for centuries had helped the Egyptians farm. As thugs took control of towns and cities and anarchy spread, revenue to be spent on projects went straight into their pockets. In 2 decades, the Memphis kings had been ruined. The peasants who had somehow stayed alive were now demoralized. They had no protection against the wicked, and they had lost all faith in rulership. Being born was a curse. I wish I were dead, little children say. He should not have made me live. For Ipuwer, what Egypt needed was the restoration of the royal family. They needed a beating heart at the center of the nation, capable of imposing order in the chaos. As one historian described it, this was a tantalizing dream, and for some even a necessity for survival. One man's testimony alone is not enough to understand what happened.
What is this? What is he saying? You see the bird in the corner? That means the squiggly lines right there, and the 2 legs. You're walking on my last line. You see this mountain up here too? You see the mountain on the screen? That's like a landmark type. It's like you're walking on my last line and the mountains are over there, divine. You're splitting me in half. That's wine, you know? You see the upside down smiley face right there with the eyes, and then you see that? That's a frown. Yeah, I got nothing. I got nothing for that one, actually.
So often happens throughout history, the voices of the overwhelming majority were lost because they could neither write nor read. Ancient Egypt was recorded largely through the eyes of its ruling class. Yet it is through the actions of ordinary people that parts of Ipuwer's vision of social collapse can be corroborated. Chapter 4. The God Bleeds. The starving masses had experienced a total psychological rupture. The illusion of divine authority had been shattered, and out of that chaos emerged a criminal economy, tomb raiding. Theft from tombs had always existed in the Old Kingdom, but when law and order collapsed, all hell broke loose. Not even the guards stationed outside the burial complexes could hold back the looters. The poor, now disenchanted with rulers, descended upon the great monuments where the kings had been buried alongside unimaginable riches. Looters dug tunnels through thick stone walls and tore hidden chambers deep inside the pyramids and tombs. Without a stable central state to police the kingdom, it was almost impossible to stop. Gold statues, jewelry, even gold masks that had once adorned the king's face were sold in markets. It was the ultimate insult to the men who once made regular citizens shake at their very sight. When archaeologists found these tombs thousands of years later, they found mummies desecrated and smashed. The ransackers hadn't just stolen, but had destroyed everything in sight. The lack of respect it showed was unprecedented. In ancient Egypt, safe passage in the afterlife meant more than life itself. Egyptians would go to great lengths to bring the bodies of dead elites back from distant wars so they could be properly buried and given their chance at arriving in paradise. The destruction of the tomb effectively murdered those men, cutting them off from eternity. Officials did everything they could to stop the looting. As tomb raiding continued into the Middle Kingdom, curses were carved into the tomb entrances to terrify the thieves. Statues were positioned like eternal guards, watching over the dead. When that failed, burial chambers were blocked with rubble, hidden behind layers of stone. And when even that proved ineffective, rulers began placing their tombs deep beneath pyramids and underground complexes. But it was never enough. Tomb raiders became a constant source of anxiety for the rulers of the New Egypt. If there was one way to stop it, it was fear, violence, pain,
I actually
death.
didn't know they did that.
Those caught trafficking stolen funerary goods could face execution. Some were beaten, and for the condemned, their last moments on the earth were horrific. The thieves grew smarter. They burned the coffins and melted down the gold inside of them, its source of origin now unknown. They looted valuable perfumed oils but sold them to travelers on the international market. Amulets of precious stones, exotic artifacts not sold locally but fenced to men who sold the goods to passing caravans. It wasn't about making some extra money, it was about survival. Survival in the kingdom that had
That's that hustle mindset,
when
bro.
the rulers failed to protect, when the governors started to act like tribal chiefs with egos the size of the sun. For the ravaged, who had once dedicated their lives to the state, this was payback. For them, the afterlife had always been closed. Poor in this world, non-existent in the other. After the collapse, that too would change. Chapter 5. The Stolen Afterlife. After the fall of the Old Kingdom came the First Intermediate Period, an era in which Egypt fractured into rival centers of power. One at Heracleopolis Magna in Lower Egypt, and the other at Thebes in Upper Egypt. It was a new world, a world with new grand narratives to replace the old stories of men who were gods in human form. As local strongmen and provincial rulers fought for control across a fractured land, the doors to the afterlife were flung open to the commoner. The evidence is not only found in historical texts, but in the graves of ordinary people. Sometime around the beginning of the First Intermediate Period, magical spells and incantations began appearing on the coffins of common Egyptians. It was a practice once reserved for the royalty and the elite. The violent collapse of the Old Order had helped give birth to something radical, a more democratic vision of heaven. Two worlds that had once been separated, ruler and commoner, had, through suffering and upheaval, began to move closer together. The Book of Two Ways, an ancient cosmography describing how to reach eternal paradise, had once only been found in tomb inscriptions and funerary guides.
Bro, you see the writings? How do you know, bro?
Then it gradually spread downward, first to lesser nobles, then to court officials and bureaucrats, and eventually to ordinary people, if they had the money to buy a coffin. These texts contained maps to help the dead navigate rivers and avoid the terrifying lake of fire. They contained the sacred words needed to pass through guarded gateways.
Best way to avoid the lake of fire is by believing in the Lord Jesus Christ.
Without such knowledge, the dead risked mutilation and annihilation in the afterlife. Their noses and lips would be cut away, and their eternal journey brought to a bloody and painful end. The pyramid texts that had accompanied once great kings became the coffin texts for almost everyone. The common man had achieved eternal life. There's no doubt ancient Egypt was an advanced civilization, but that didn't mean they didn't have some strange beliefs.
Yeah, they had really odd beliefs, bro. You wouldn't catch me. Whoa. Whoa, what's this, guys? What the flip?